In 1405, China launched the largest naval expedition in human history, not to conquer, not to colonize, to trade. Admiral Zheng He commanded a fleet of 317 ships carrying 28,000 men. The largest vessels, the treasure ships, were 400 feet long. Columbus's Santa Maria was 85 feet. For 3 decades, Chinese ships reached Arabia, East Africa, India, and Southeast Asia. They didn't need to force anyone to trade in Chinese currency. Everyone wanted to. The Ming Dynasty in 1400 controlled roughly a third of the world's GDP. Its currency, its silk, its porcelain, its technology, all dominant, all trusted. This is what reserve currency status looks like at its peak. And here is why this matters to you right now. China is the world's largest economy by purchasing power. Its cross-border payment system processed a record 1.22 trillion yuan in a single day in March 2026. Yuan oil settlements are happening in the Strait of Hormuz right now. China has been here before. 500 years ago, it held the world's financial dominance, and it lost it. What happened then is the most important economic story most people have never heard, because it's happening again. To understand what China lost, you need to understand what it had. The Song Dynasty, which preceded the Ming, invented paper money, not as a curiosity, as a functioning national currency. 800 years before most of the world caught up. By 1000 AD, China's economy was the most sophisticated on Earth. It had invented the compass, gunpowder, printing, and the mechanical clock. Its iron production in 1078 was roughly equal to Britain's iron production in 1788, 7 centuries later. The Grand Canal, completed in 609 AD, connected China's northern and southern economies in a single integrated market. Nothing in Europe or the Middle East came close. When Marco Polo arrived in China in 1275, he found cities larger than anything in the Western world. He described a paper currency system so sophisticated that he said Europeans would not believe it existed. They didn't. For 1,000 years, China was the world's dominant economic power, not intermittently, continuously. And then it made a decision that changed everything. The decision came in 1433. Zheng He died on his 7th voyage. And the Ming Dynasty didn't just stop the treasure fleet voyages, it burned the ships. It destroyed the records. It made ocean-going voyages illegal under penalty of death. Historians call this the Great Withdrawal. The reasoning at the time seemed sound. The voyages were expensive. The Confucian bureaucracy argued that foreign trade was beneath a civilization as advanced as China's, that China had everything it needed within its own borders. That engagement with barbarian nations brought moral contamination. The emperor agreed. Within a generation, the largest navy in the world had ceased to exist. Within a century, European ships were sailing routes that Chinese admirals had mapped decades earlier. And within 2 centuries, those same European ships were arriving in Chinese ports, not to trade as equals, but to impose terms. The Great Withdrawal didn't protect China. It created the vacuum that others filled. The consequences unfolded slowly. At first, China barely noticed. Its internal economy was still vast. Its population still the world's largest. Its culture still sophisticated. But the world's trade routes were being redrawn without China at their center. Portugal mapped the African coast. Spain reached the Americas. the Dutch built the first global trading empire, all using navigational techniques the Chinese had pioneered, all accumulating wealth that China had chosen not to pursue. By 1600, the silver flowing from Spanish mines in the Americas was reaching China, not because China was powerful, but because Chinese merchants were desperate for it. The Ming Dynasty's paper currency had collapsed through overprinting. The government had done what governments always do when they run out of money. It printed more. Hyperinflation destroyed the currency that had once been the world's most sophisticated financial instrument. By 1644, the Ming Dynasty collapsed, not to a foreign invasion initially, to a peasant rebellion driven by poverty, inflation, and a government that had spent a century withdrawing from the world while the world moved on without it. The next 2 centuries are what the Chinese call the Century of Humiliation, and the word humiliation is precise. In 1793, Britain sent an ambassador to the Qing dynasty to request expanded trade rights. The emperor replied that China had no need of British goods, that the empire possessed all things in abundance. 27 years later, Britain returned with warships. The Opium Wars of 1839 and 1856 forced China to open its ports, accept foreign legal jurisdiction on Chinese soil, and pay war reparations in silver. The country that had invented paper money was paying debts in physical silver to countries that had been subsistence economies when China was financing the known world. Hong Kong was ceded to Britain. Treaty ports were carved into Chinese territory. Foreign powers maintained armies on Chinese soil. This is what happens to a civilization that withdraws from the world at the moment the world is being organized. You don't just lose the trade, you lose the ability to set the terms. And when you can no longer set the terms, others set them for you. China spent 150 years trying to reverse this. 2 revolutions, a civil war, a communist takeover, the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, tens of millions of deaths, and through all of it, one constant in Chinese strategic thinking: never again. Never again withdraw from the world while others organize it. Never again allow foreign powers to set the terms of China's economic engagement. Never again be the country that invented the tools and let others use them to build empires. Deng Xiaoping's reforms, beginning in 1978, were not just economic policy. They were the systematic reversal of the Great Withdrawal. China rejoined the world's trading system, accumulated foreign reserves, built manufacturing capacity, and waited. For 40 years, it waited, absorbing technology, building infrastructure, establishing trade relationships, creating parallel financial systems. The Belt and Road Initiative is Zheng He's treasure fleet. CIPS is the alternative to SWIFT. mBridge is the digital payment infrastructure for a post-dollar world. China has not forgotten what it lost. It has been rebuilding the conditions to get it back. Here is where history and the present moment meet. In March 2026, China's cross-border payment system processed a record 1.22 trillion yuan in a single day. The UAE left OPEC on May 1, 2026, immediately triggering commentary about petroyuan viability. Iran is accepting yuan for Hormuz passage. Saudi Arabia has experimented with yuan payments for infrastructure projects. Gold prices breached $5,400 per ounce, reflecting declining confidence in dollar-denominated assets. Foreign central bank treasury holdings are at their lowest level since 2012. This is not a prediction. This is the current state of the global financial system. But here is the part that the petroyuan narrative misses. China has been here before. And the last time, it had every advantage: the largest fleet, the most sophisticated currency, the most advanced technology. And it still lost it, not to a rival, to a decision. The Ming Dynasty didn't lose its financial dominance because it was weak. It lost it because it chose to withdraw at the exact moment when presence was everything. The question for China today is not whether it has the tools. It clearly does. The question is whether it will use them consistently over decades without reversing course, because the pattern that destroyed Spain, the Dutch, and Britain doesn't only apply to the empire that holds the reserve currency, it also applies to the empire that wants to take it. The next video looks at what actually happens when a reserve currency transition completes, not the dramatic version, the real one. That video is already up. Link is in the description.